Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You never forget the first time someone pulls away from your hand like it burns them, especially when it's the person who used to reach for it in their sleep. It wasn't sudden. It was surgical, a slow erosion of closeness. Not with yelling, not with cheating, but with rejection you can't point to, only feel. At first, I blamed myself. Long hours at work. Stress. Maybe I hadn't been as present. Maybe I was too predictable. Maybe. But intimacy doesn't vanish because someone forgets to buy flowers. It dies when love becomes a negotiation, and one of you starts keeping score. Her name was Rachel. We'd been married 3 years. Lived in a townhouse just outside Austin. From the outside, we looked fine. Smiles in public. Weekend brunches. Her Instagram told a story of a perfect life. But behind our front door, we were strangers sharing space. At first, it was small. She'd flinch slightly when I kissed her on the cheek. She'd turn away in bed. Claim headaches. Stress. Fatigue. I didn't push. I gave her space. I figured it would pass. But weeks turned into months. And the space I gave her didn't bring her closer. It gave her permission to keep pulling away. One night, I tried to hold her, gently, without expectation. Just presence. She froze. "I'm just not in the mood for this kind of attention right now," she said, not even looking at me. That was the moment. The moment I stopped reaching. I didn't fight. Didn't yell. Didn't ask her to explain how she could post about love and gratitude while living in emotional exile. I just went silent. Because begging someone to see you is the fastest way to disappear. The next morning, I didn't make coffee for 2. Didn't ask about her day. Didn't try to kiss her goodbye. I simply walked out the door. And for the first time in months, I felt light. Not free. Not yet. But no longer tied to a fight that only one of us was pretending still mattered. Rachel didn't notice. Or maybe she did. But she was testing how far she could push before I broke. What she didn't know? I wasn't going to break. I was going to vanish. Quietly. Cleanly. Without warning. And it would start not with a storm, but with stillness. I didn't slam doors. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't even change my routine. But I stopped being available. Emotionally, mentally, physically. It started in the smallest ways. She'd mention a dinner with friends. I wouldn't offer to join. She'd leave her coffee mug in the sink. I stopped cleaning it. She'd talk about work. I'd nod, but never ask follow-up questions. It wasn't out of spite. It was self-preservation. There's a point in every man's life where he realizes that being quiet isn't weakness, it's control. Because silence can't be manipulated. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It just exists like a wall they didn't know they were building until they run face first into it. Rachel didn't ask why I wasn't initiating anything. She didn't ask why I slept on the edge of the bed. She didn't ask why I started eating alone at the kitchen bar while she scrolled through her phone on the couch. But I could feel the shift in her posture. She'd pause before asking me anything. Her tone was softer, not out of care, but calculation. Like she knew something was slipping, but couldn't figure out what. I wasn't being passive-aggressive. I was detaching. And detachment looks quiet on the outside. But inside, it's a storm. I started working late. Going to the gym before she woke up. Running errands I didn't need to run. Just to feel the freedom of being somewhere she wasn't. People at work started noticing. "You've been in a good mood lately," one guy said. And he was right. I had energy again. Not because things at home were better, but because I'd stopped bleeding out for someone who never noticed the wounds. Rachel came home one night with takeout from my favorite Thai spot. She smiled like it was a peace offering. But I wasn't at war. I ate quietly. Didn't comment on the food. Didn't thank her. Not out of rudeness, but because I no longer rewarded breadcrumbs with gratitude. She asked if I wanted to watch something together. I told her I had work. Sat at my desk for an hour, doing nothing. That's when I knew. I didn't want to fix it. I wanted out. But not with a dramatic exit. No screaming. No fights. No scenes. Just a slow, deliberate disappearance. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is stop trying to be heard. And start letting her hear the silence she created. A week into my quiet exit, she started changing. Nothing drastic. Nothing obvious. But I noticed. She started texting me during the day again. Not, "I love you." Not, "I miss you." Just small check-ins. As if she was trying to measure my temperature without getting burned. I didn't respond right away. Sometimes not at all. One night, she sat down next to me on the couch. Closer than she'd been in months. Her leg brushed mine. I didn't move away, but I didn't lean in either. We watched a movie in silence. No laughter, no commentary. Just two people staring at a screen like strangers waiting in an airport lounge. She glanced at me a few times. I felt it. The pause in her breath. The searching in her eyes. But I didn't meet her halfway. Because she hadn't been halfway in a long time. The next morning, she made breakfast. Eggs. Bacon. Toast. She never cooked. Not even when things were good. I walked into the kitchen and found her standing there like it was a scene she wanted to rewrite. Thought you might be hungry, she said. I sat. Ate. Didn't compliment the food. Not because it wasn't good, but because I knew it wasn't about the meal. It was a test. And I wasn't playing anymore. She waited for me to say something. Anything. I didn't. Later that day, I came home to candles. Real ones. Scented. The bedroom was clean. New sheets. Her hair curled. Soft music playing. She sat on the bed, legs crossed, like the Rachel I hadn't seen in over a year. But it was too clean. Too staged. Too late. She asked me to lie down. Just to rest, no pressure. I sat beside her, looked at the room, then got up and took a shower instead. She didn't follow. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she curled next to me like old times. But I felt nothing. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about her loving me again. It was about her losing control. Control she didn't even know she had until it was gone. Because when a man stops trying to be wanted, he becomes something else entirely. Unreachable. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. She was just beginning to notice the shift. But I had already crossed the point of no return. And once a man gets used to his own silence, there's no music she can play that will bring him back. It wasn't until the silence started echoing that she finally broke it. One night, she stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, but her confidence cracked. Her voice was quiet, almost rehearsed. She asked if everything was okay. I said, I'm fine. She asked if we were okay. I didn't answer. Because we hadn't existed in months. There was no us. Only distance shaped like routine. She called me cold. Said I'd changed. Said she didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe she was right. Because the man she knew, the one who always tried to fix it, who waited for her mood to change, who fought for affection like it was a prize, he was gone. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't accused her, hadn't demanded a thing. But that's what scared her most, the version of me that stopped reacting. Because silence doesn't just hurt. It reflects. She started listing reasons. Stress, work, hormones, emotional exhaustion. She said she didn't mean to push me away, that she just needed time, that she assumed I'd always understand. And that was the problem. She assumed my patience had no edge. But I'd been on that edge for months, watching her turn our home into a place where affection was rationed like punishment. Where the only time I felt noticed was when I wasn't meeting her emotional quota. Now she wanted connection again, but not from love. From panic. She asked if I still loved her. I didn't answer, because feelings weren't the point anymore. She mistook love for obligation. And I refused to be obligated to a woman who only reached for me when she sensed my absence more than my presence. Later that week, she tried again. Small touches, fake laughs, jokes from the old days. But I wasn't biting. Because you can't reheat something that was never cooked all the way through. I'd already disconnected my emotions from her approval. No more tiptoeing. No more waiting for her to validate my place in my own marriage. And that terrified her more than anything. Because for the first time since we'd met, she realized I didn't need her to be okay anymore. She couldn't guilt me, couldn't shame me, couldn't charm me. She had given me silence for months. And now, I was fluent in it. Fluent enough to disappear, without ever having to say goodbye. The shift was visible now. Not in me. I was already gone. But in her. She started replaying moments out loud. Remember that weekend in Colorado? Remember when we stayed up until 3 a.m., just talking? I remembered. But memories don't rebuild what neglect destroyed. She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to a version of me she'd discarded when she thought I'd always be there. The man who planned surprise dates, who kissed her shoulder while she made coffee, who reached for her in sleep even when she didn't reach back. Now, she searched for him in old photos, saved messages, dinner reservations we never used. She smiled at her phone screen, probably rereading something I once said years ago. as if nostalgia could rewind time. But I wasn't nostalgic. I was awake. I'd stopped viewing our history as something sacred. It had become a record of every time I stepped forward while she leaned away. She began showing up in places she used to avoid. The gym, the kitchen in the morning. She even asked to come to one of my weekend hikes, something she always claimed was too early before. I told her I'd be going alone. No anger, just fact. She offered to make dinner that night. Bought ingredients she never used, candles she hadn't touched in months. She played the same playlist we used to dance to in the kitchen back when things were light. But the room didn't feel warm. It felt rehearsed. I ate, thanked her, then got up without finishing my drink. She called after me, softly, hesitantly, but the sound didn't land. Because once a man starts healing alone, the woman who once had all of him becomes just a voice in the background. She texted me later that night, from the other room. I miss us, but there was no us to miss. Just two people who once wanted the same life at the same time, and then didn't. She was trying to recreate warmth without changing the cold that caused it, hoping that gestures could replace genuine change. But I no longer believed in sudden turnarounds. Not after months of emotional drought. She hadn't fallen back in love. She'd fallen into fear. Fear of losing what she thought would always wait for her. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was preparing. Not to fight. Not to fix. To leave. And when I did, she'd finally understand that silence was never the punishment. It was the proof that I had already left. It was a Thursday night when she finally cracked. No makeup. No distractions. Just her, barefoot in the doorway, holding the edge of her sweater like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse, didn't deflect. She just stood there, and for the first time in a long time, her silence wasn't cold. It was afraid. I know I messed things up, she said. Her voice was raw, not performative, not this time. But it didn't matter. Because when someone spends months tuning you out, their words don't land on your heart. They land on the surface and slide off. I nodded once. Didn't say anything. She stepped closer. Slowly. Said she wanted to fix things. Said she remembered how it used to be. Said she missed my voice, my touch, the way I used to look at her like she was the only woman in the world. And she was. Until she wasn't. Until the woman I saw turned into a stranger who rationed affection like it was a reward I hadn't earned. Now she stood there, asking for access to a version of me she had starved. I told her I heard her. That's all. Just that. Because I did hear her. But I wasn't going to save her from the silence anymore. She asked if I still loved her. I said I didn't know. Not because I was confused, but because the answer no longer mattered. She broke down. Finally. Sat on the floor. Said she thought I'd never leave. That I'd always come back. That she was testing me. Yes, but only to see if I really cared. That was the moment it hit me. She never thought she had to earn my love. She believed it was hers by default, permanent, unquestioned, unconditional. But love without respect isn't love. It's ownership. And I refused to belong to someone who only valued me once I started slipping through her fingers. I helped her off the floor. Gently. She leaned into me, and I didn't lean back. Because this wasn't reconciliation. It was closure. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't rehash the past. Didn't demand she feel guilt. I just gave her the truth in the quietest way possible. You don't get to abandon a man emotionally, then ask him to rescue you from the very silence you created. She didn't cry again, because the moment she saw I wasn't fighting, she knew she'd already lost, and the silence she feared most wasn't between us. It was inside her now. I didn't tell her I was planning to leave, didn't drop hints, didn't create drama. I just acted. The silence had done its work. Now it was time to make moves. The first thing I did was open a separate bank account. Quietly. No sudden withdrawals. Just slow, steady transfers over weeks. Enough to build a life without her, but not enough for her to notice right away. I got a new phone. Same number for now, but different hardware. Something clean. Untouched. Mine. I spoke to a realtor. Looked at apartments. 1 bedroom, unfurnished. I didn't want echoes of what we'd built. I wanted a place where silence didn't feel like punishment, but peace. I started sleeping with my phone on silent. Not because I expected anything urgent, but because I didn't want to hear her typing next to me anymore. Her scrolling. Her sighs. Her passive-aggressive bedtime rituals. Every sound was a reminder of what we'd become. She noticed I was dressing differently, more polished, cleaner. Not for her, for me. Because there's something about planning your exit that makes a man sharper, more present, not in the relationship, but in himself. I took walks after dinner. Long ones. No destination. Just steps. She asked once where I'd been. I said, nowhere in particular. And it was the most honest thing I'd said to her in months. Because nowhere was exactly where I needed to be, away from her, from the tension, from the constant weight of unspoken resentment. One evening, I removed my wedding band. Not dramatically, not symbolically, just placed it in the drawer next to the bed. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and didn't want to ask why. That's how far we drifted. A missing ring didn't spark a question, only avoidance. I started deleting old photos from my phone. Not because I was angry, but because they didn't mean anything anymore. They were memories of a man I no longer was, loving a woman who only showed up when she felt him slipping. I wasn't erasing her. I was reclaiming me. And every quiet step I took made that clearer. She kept trying to bridge the gap. Casual touches, forced conversations, late night "you okay?" texts from the other side of the bed. But connection doesn't grow in soil you've scorched. And while she tried to plant new seeds, I was already walking toward the door, not slamming it, just unlocking it. Because once you realize you were alone the whole time, leaving doesn't hurt. It heals. It was the way she looked at me. Not with affection, not with love, but with confusion, like she was trying to read a language she used to be fluent in and couldn't even recognize the letters. Because I had changed. Not overnight, but quietly, gradually, precisely. She used to read my moods like a map. Now I was a blank page. She asked if I wanted to take a trip together. A weekend up north. Something just for us. I said I had plans. Didn't elaborate. She nodded, pretending not to be bothered, but I could see the crack behind her eyes. Not pain. Not yet. Panic. Because this wasn't the man who waited for her to be ready. This was someone who no longer needed her approval to move forward. She started watching me more, across the table, in the hallway, when I got ready in the morning, as if trying to study who I had become without her knowing. But it was too late for studying. The test had already been graded. At dinner, she brought up counseling. Said maybe we just needed help finding our way back. I didn't argue. I just kept eating. Because I didn't want our way back. I didn't want her tears, her effort, her sudden realizations that I mattered. I wanted freedom. From emotional bartering. From the tension of pretending. From the weight of being invisible next to someone who only notices absence. She started dressing differently. Wearing the perfume I once said made her smell like home. Lighting candles she hadn't touched in over a year. But the scent didn't move me. It reminded me of how long I begged for closeness. And how easily she withheld it. I no longer saw her as mine. I didn't see her as cruel either. I saw her as someone who made a choice. Over and over. To stay distant. Until she feared being left behind. And now that I was gone emotionally, she wanted to chase the version of me she broke. But ghosts don't come back. They just pass through. One night, I caught her watching me again. But this time, there was no confusion. There was loss. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the quiet understanding that the man sitting across from her had already walked out in every way that mattered. And the only thing left between us was the silence she once chose, now turned against her. That evening, she asked me to sit down. No music, no distractions, just her voice, steady but trembling underneath. She said she knew something was happening, that she could feel me slipping, that she was scared, and for once, she didn't try to mask it with sarcasm or pride. She talked about the beginning, the first few years, the laughter, the passion, the late-night drives with no destination. She said she didn't know when it started to fade. Didn't realize how far apart we'd grown until I stopped reaching back. I listened, not out of obligation, out of respect for what we used to be. But the words didn't land the way she hoped. They didn't stir anything inside me, because I had already done my grieving. I had mourned the version of her who used to reach for my hand without hesitation. The version who made me feel like I was home. Now she sat across from me as a woman I didn't recognize. And more importantly, a woman who didn't recognize me anymore. I told her I wasn't angry. She blinked, almost surprised. But it was true. I wasn't angry. Not bitter. Not spiteful. Just done. She reached for my hand. Said she still loved me. That we could try again. And I believed her. But I also believed in timing. And love that shows up too late isn't love. It's survival. She asked if we could fix it, if I could give it one more shot. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone trying to save a structure that had already collapsed, trying to light a fire with ashes. I told her I was moving out, that I'd already found a place. She didn't cry, not at first, just stared at me like she was hoping I'd flinch, like maybe I was bluffing. But I wasn't. I had made my peace. And when a man makes peace with the silence, he doesn't return to the noise. She finally asked, "Is there someone else?" I shook my head. "No, there's just me now." Because that was the truth. This wasn't about another woman. It was about a man rediscovering the version of himself that didn't beg for closeness, didn't explain his value, didn't wait to be seen. I packed the last box that night. No goodbye kiss, no final hug, just a closed door behind me, and the quietest kind of freedom. 6 months passed. No texts, no late-night calls, no desperate messages asking why. Just silence. The same silence she once fed me, now returned with interest. I moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy. Clean. Uncluttered. Quiet. The kind of place you build when you're not trying to impress anyone. Just breathe. I got back into the gym. Took early runs before the city woke up. Met new people, not because I needed to, but because I finally had space for real connection. There was peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace that comes when you stop carrying someone who never wanted to be held. And then it happened. At a grocery store. I saw her near the produce section, staring at a bag of oranges like she wasn't really there. She didn't notice me at first, but when she did, it was like time cracked. She froze, then smiled. Softly. Not the smile she used to give me, the one that said, "You're mine." This one was different. It was the kind people give when they realize they lost something they thought would always wait. I nodded. She stepped closer. Said, "You look good." I said, "Thanks." She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth, not to brag, just to be real. I said I'd been steady, clear, light. She blinked. Said, "I'm glad." We didn't exchange numbers. Didn't suggest coffee. Didn't play the game. Because there was nothing to revive. That version of us was gone, and I wasn't interested in sequels. She looked down at the oranges in her hand. Said something about cooking more now. About rediscovering herself. About healing. I wished her well. Not bitter. Not cold. Just done. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared more about myself. She had refused intimacy. I disappeared. And the silence she never expected had reshaped everything. Not just the relationship, but me. Because sometimes the greatest power a man has isn't in fighting, isn't in fixing, isn't in forgiving. It's in walking away so silently that the absence screams louder than any goodbye ever could. And now, she lives with the echo, not of my voice, but of the version of me she'll never see again. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.